No, yeah, 2B and 4B. Because you guys can't really see 2H. Let's go into 2B. All right, so now is when, you know, we talked about edge control a little bit. So keeping your paper covered, you want to really analyze what's happening there. I think the switch is here, comes up here. Because this is kind of far away, I'm not going to go into too much detail in here because I really can't see too much. But I'll get more into the bigger folds. So under here, I know I have a cast shadow right there, and I have a coarse shadow under here. So these are just a bunch of cylinders, reflected light.
Is that a bunch of cylinders?
Yeah, I'll explain in a minute. Okay. So in here, this gets pretty dark. And it's defining, this is like cast shadow in here, the lit side of the next fold. So it's just like a bunch of cylinders stacked against each other. So here's
like
the
lit rim of the cylinder?
Yeah, it's the lit side.
Oh, okay.
So this darkness is the cast shadow of the cylinder behind it. This is the lit side, and now we have the coarse shadow coming in here.
It looks like that's another thing.
Whoops. So here's your coarse shadow. Remember on the cylinder you have that coarse shadow. Gets a little smaller as it gets into that pinched area. And then there's kind of a core, and this is kind of like maybe the pepper, or it's sort of an irregular core that comes down like that. And this is your reflected light.
So while you were drawing the cylinder shape,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
drew that line that's kind of like indented. So you drew the outer line and the inner ones?
My initial lay-in?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the basic shapes very lightly, and you're going to pull that into your value structure, basically. So right now I'm looking for coarse shadows, because that's what's going to turn it. And then now you have a little cast shadow underneath here. Do you see that little cast shadow there? It's small. Cast shadow, reflected light, coarse shadow. So here is tricky because the light is coming in this way. It's hitting this surface. So now this surface is dropping into shadow. So you have a coarse shadow here. That's kind of just dissipating out. It's not really casting a shadow because it's sort of a soft curve right here. And then you have that kind of highlight in there. You have a little bit of value here. And you have this little highlight in between there. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good.
We try to figure out how to do it though.
So just use the side of your pencil and think core, reflected light, cast shadow. So now we're going to do it again. This is like the mid-tone moving into the highlight. So the highlight is like here, white of the paper for the highlight, right here, moving into the coarse shadow, turning here into the coarse shadow. Now this one kind of just disappears there. Coarse shadow. And again, this one doesn't really, it's not really casting a shadow. Coming up here, pinched again. Now this is a pretty dark and straight line here, as it is here. As it gets up here, it's defining the lit edge. So it's getting a little darker and a little sharper edge there. Let's see what this does. This comes down, and hard to find. Here's the shadow. coarse shadow coming up into this line. It's a pretty sharp line. This is, I'm not great with straight lines, so let's see how I do here. Could be better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that into my shadow. So you can see this gets a little bit thicker as it moves down now. And it moves into this shape here, which is kind of a core, like a soft, I don't see a cast shadow. Well, yeah, there is a little cast shadow under here. It's a little bit of a cast shadow there. And then you have some lit area, and this kind of moves into this darker area here. So some of these are just gradations. Right here, this shape is pretty well defined under here by this darkness, the edge of it. And you have a little coarse shadow coming up here. Gets a little bit thinner as you get up to the top. I'm going to pull this out a little bit. Coarse shadow, it's a cylinder. Mid-tone highlight, and this is like a cast shadow back here that's helping bring out the edge of this lit side of the cylinder. So under here, again, this is pretty, not as sharp edged. It gets pretty dark in here in the cast shadow. Super sharp edge here. And this cast shadow from this shape, this cylinder is casting this shadow on the next shape. Coming all the way up here. This is pretty light till you get back here, and then you have kind of this reflected light here, because the shadow behind it gets even darker. And I'll use the 4B for that. I'm starting to run out of 2B. Coming up here. Dang it. Okay, now I'm just going to wing it. That one's still on, right? Okay, good. So you have your coarse shadow coming up here. Coarse shadow, reflected light, cast shadow. Cast shadow. See it? See the cast shadow? Cast shadow.
I'm kind of confused between the difference between cast shadow and coarse shadow.
Okay, let's review it. Good. I'm glad you're asking. Now it's time to ask. Okay, here's your coarse shadow. This wraps around. Reflected light is always darker than your highlight. And now I'm just going to throw in that cast shadow back there really quick. And I'll explain, because I'm running out of 2B.
Your cast shadow is the dark one, right?
Yes. So we haven't done that yet. So that's why it doesn't have a lot of dimension yet.
Okay, we haven't done it.
Nope. Not
So
on
there's
not on the wall. We've done cast shadows in
See,
here.
That's where I'm getting confused.
Yeah, because this is a cast shadow.
So which one's the
This is a cast shadow. I'll explain in a minute. We haven't done the wall. The wall is out here. Kind of soft. So the wall.
So the edge is soft?
Yeah, so you want to kind of soften some of the edges. Remember, it's going to get sharper as it gets. You have to keep this super sharp. I'm going to go right to my 4B because I'm running out of 2B.
Was it sharp?
Oh, it's okay. We'll just switch to 4B. So keeping this edge really sharp, because this is the edge of your fabric, You're going to come in, you can outline it, because you're going to need to pull that into your cast shadow. Oops. So then you just do this. Nobody really knows, except you guys. And everyone is watching. So remember, the occlusion shadow is the darkest, and you can use the tip of your pencil here. It's going to clean up that edge.
And that's called what?
Occlusion shadow is that really dark part. And then it kind of bounces into ambient light out here. I'm just kind of rushing through this. And then you have a little bit of a coarse shadow on the edge of your shadow out there. It gets a little softer out here. So there's a little gradation in there. Does it show it all? Kinda, sorta, not too much. Hopefully Kristen is there. Kirsten? I'm going to push these cores a little bit more so you can see them. Coarse shadow, and let's review that. So, a cylinder, what do I have here? 3B, that'll work. Okay, so you have your cylinder here, like this. Here's your coarse shadow, right? Here's your reflected light. Reflected light is always darker than the highlight. In this case, our light source is coming in this way. So that's your highlight. Midtone, coarse shadow, reflected light. If you had a cylinder right next to it, another cylinder, the cast shadow is going to go up the cylinder. It's not on the ground anymore because that cylinder next to it is blocking it. Then you have your midtone, coarse shadow, reflected light. Another cylinder is blocking the cast shadow, so the cast shadow is coming under and then up. It's like if you had a cylinder, reflected light, sorry, coarse shadow, reflected light, and there was a wall right here. Let's say there was a wall here. Your cast shadow would come out, and that wall is blocking it, so it would go up the wall. Your cast shadow would look like that. It's only going straight out when there's nothing there to stop it on the table, you know? So that's your cast shadow on a table. This is your cast shadow up a wall. And remember, it's dark to light because you get some reflected light in there. So there's a change there in your shadow. Coarse shadow, reflected light, midtone. So when I say, you know, coarse shadow, reflected light, cast shadow, it's just because of the direction of the light source and the shape of this, it's only casting a little shadow. Right here is a cylinder, coarse shadow, reflected light, cast shadow on the next cylinder right next to it. Does that make sense? It's very logical. Let's throw another coarse shadow in here, turn it.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I don't know if my drink's gonna look like that.
But it's just a bunch of cylinders. So once you understand the principle of light, first it's that gesture, big to small. And also remember, if you see weird wrinkles and stuff that are coming across, don't draw those, because that's going to disrupt the movement of the fabric. Okay. Same for anything on the table. If you decide to do that, don't draw wrinkles. Don't draw cuts in the fruit, and don't draw wrinkles.
Could you do something like this, like
more highlighted area?
What's that?
Like, as an example, can you just do like a portion of
Sure.
that
Yeah.
lighted area?
Sure. So it's the same thing. You don't see a core on that quite as much. Even if you don't see it, again, this is artistic license. So I would throw one in there, even though I don't see it, because I want it to read. So I'm going to throw a coarse shadow in there, and I'm going to throw a little cast shadow on here. See that straight line again. Cast shadow, reflected light. Because that's what's going to make that turn. You can always pull it back out. If you lose it. Midtones. Same in here. See what's happening there. Yeah, so it's getting a little bit. Dang it, those straight lines. Coarse shadow. Cast shadow.
Same thing we usually do in lighter.
Reflected light. Well, those cast shadows are pretty dark on that side still. It's just, yeah, you have a broader area that's lit, basically. So the coarse shadow really is probably really tiny off to the side.
I see what you're saying now.
But if you keep just doing coarse shadow, reflected light, and cast shadow over and over, it's going to have a readability. It's going to read. Here's your cast shadow under here. Another cast shadow wrapping around here. And then just come in and try to, like, the edge of things, clean it up, keep it nice and sharp. And then you might want to make this a little bit darker and cleaner as it gets into that dark area there. Okay? Great. You got this. You got it.